Welcome everyone to Strong Australia Ballarat. No, I'm only joking. I was dared to do it. I know the rivalry. Bendigo, the beautiful Bendigo. With me, we've got Christian Bennett from Woolies, Marnie Baker from Bendigo Bank, Rob Stevenson from Bendigo, and Jennifer Westicott, the Chief Executive of Business Council of Australia. Please put your hands together for a wonderful panel this afternoon. Jennifer, in Bendigo, we discussed it for the last couple of hours. Give our audience a sense of how you see the prospects for this city and the wonderful opportunities that lay before it.
Yeah, look, this is a place of just incredible potential, some of which is being realised, but you sort of think, boy, if we could get our act together, this would just push the country. So if it's, if I go to manufacturing, so we've got Steve McCulloch here, I don't know if your dad's here or not, but we're out. Oh, there he is. Okay. We're out at McCulloch's this morning. Have got this fantastic partnership with Thales, the defence company, building this specialised machinery. You think about scaling that up. You've got this incredible agribusiness precinct here. You've got this incredible health precinct. You've got a kind of, 2 universities, a great TAFE. You've got an airport, which, I was looking at it this morning thinking, gee, if you put an integrated logistics hub at that airport, you'd be able to get really high value-added end-stage produce into Asian markets. So I look at it all and I think, that's just tipping the iceberg of what's available and what's the opportunity here. And I look at it and I think a few bits of infrastructure, a bit of energy, a bit of coordination, a bit of investment by the private sector, a bit of investment by government, a bit of concentration rather than the way we normally do things, try and do something everywhere. Bendigo could actually kind of like really take off, but in taking off, starting to push the country forward too, like, just pick up manufacturing, which we've been talking about all morning. We've stopped thinking we can produce things in Australia. Well, we can produce things. We're not going to produce mass production lines of things, but nobody in the world's going to do that. And the differentiation that used to drive manufacturing, which was cheap labour, that's not what's going to drive it now. It's the specialty stuff that Ken and Steve are doing. It's the connection with big companies. So I just think, why can't we as a country take 20 or 30 places like Bendigo, put our effort in, really organise ourselves, and obviously we'll talk about skill shortages, but I just see places like Bendigo and I think, let's get our act together.
Marnie, something that you were telling me over lunch as well, and is the fact that Bendigo is such a diverse place. Things from the gallery, like the Elvis exhibition now, which is a blockbuster, to the culinary scene. Your business has been built out of this place, but now is a national, major bank nationwide.
Yeah, and hello everyone. It's lovely to actually see a lot of familiar faces. We do a few of these around the country, but it's lovely to be doing it here at home. And what you're seeing in the room here today is a lot of proud, passionate people that are running unbelievable businesses that are as diverse, like you said, as we've got agriculture from farm to plate, gastronomy, where, the stuff that we do, go to the restaurants and you're actually sampling local produce there, to manufacturing, to health, to arts and culture, to financial services, to retail, local chocolatier here today in Hayley. We have got so much diversity here. We're not ever reliant on just one particular industry. And I think that's a real strength of this region, not just Bendigo, but the broader Greater Bendigo region, because we do take in quite a large geographical area when you look more broadly than just Bendigo, the city. But yeah, we're pretty special here, and it's been lovely to be able to showcase a bit of that to Jennifer and her team today, and to see the likes of Ken and Steve, who are representative of so many Bendigonians, being really, really proud of the businesses that they run.
Rob Stevenson from Bendigo, the research that's being done in this part of the world as well is quite extraordinary and could be groundbreaking in certain respects.
Yeah, as a lot of you know, I was previously out at La Trobe Uni, and just knowing some of the incredible research that's being done in engineering and in biomed out there, it's really world standard. It's fantastic that we're here today talking to this group of people, but I sort of think you're amongst the converted, and I think one of the things that we haven't done really well, either in Bendigo or more broadly, is let other people know just how bloody good we are here. I think there's I know at the uni, one of the profs has invented some bizarre thread that he calls his Spider-Man thread, because it's you put a few together and it's capable of lifting an F100 truck. I think it's about 8 threads finer than a human hair. There's a professor out there, or an associate professor in biomed, who's got relationships with New York University. She built an amazing microscope that's capable of looking at single molecules, inside single molecules and inside single cells and single chromosomes to examine damage. And she won't do it herself, but that's part of a global effort to cure cancer. And I think, there's some absolutely stunning things happening here that we don't talk about, but what could come from that and from those international relationships, and particularly now the connections that we've got. If we can get a faster train, we've got a sensational airport that connects us directly to the world. One bounce through Sydney, and you're in Singapore, or you're on your way to New York, and those sorts of things. And I think those things are really important. When you look at great cities in Europe, it's about how connected they are to other great cities, and I think that's what we're really starting to do now.
And Christian Bennett from Woolworths, this is something that you've been pointing out as well, is this connectivity is crucial to get people here. I'm sure many of the businesses and representatives here today will be talking about labour shortages, and for you and your business, that connectivity piece is an important one, isn't it?
Yeah, Kieran, it is. And let me just say, it is wonderful to be in Bendigo. As someone who spends a lot of time driving up the Calder, particularly sort of towards Kyneton, you know how much potential and what a fabulous part of the world is as you go past Gisborne, Woodend, Kyneton, Castlemaine, and then you get to Bendigo and all of the little towns that surround this area. It is just a very special part of the world, and we're very proud to have called Bendigo home since part of our environment since 1939, and there are 750 locals that work for us, and we're very proud to have them as part of our team. And that connectivity, whether it's digital connectivity, physical connectivity, it's so exciting for Bendigo to have this airport link to Sydney. I think it is a really important attraction element. I think the rail link with Melbourne and then up to Echuca, it is such a valuable part, an enabler of the enormous potential that exists, not just here in central Victoria, but in regional Australia, where we have 45,000 team members in total, and that connectivity helps us bring in talent and help encourage great jobs and a really vibrant community, particularly in a city like this with just such an extraordinary history.
One of the other things that gets people in is health services, to say that, okay, Bendigo's got that ticked, hasn't it? That hospital redevelopment, again, employment, but it's that health reassurance to someone. If you're saying moving out of the suburbs of Melbourne, they can be reassured coming here.
Yeah, and we're drawing, there's patients or people that come to the hospital here that come from Mildura. They come from places that are closer to the likes of Adelaide, but would much prefer to actually come, into the region than actually go into a capital city for their care. So it actually draws. It draws from a much larger, base. I'll say the other thing about infrastructure, 100 gig economy here. Well, I mean, I think we've got Marg here from the board of the Bendigo Telco, but Kevin Dole, the CEO of Bendigo Telco, is here, I think, as well. But being able to operate, and it's available within the CBD at the moment, so it goes up to the hospital, all the way up to the hospital from the CBD. But having that available, that's what powers. That's what's going to help to actually power businesses and the economy here as we move into the future.
So you think that can be used to attract
absolutely
the next generation?
Absolutely.
What else needs to be done, Jennifer? Because obviously, you think about industrial land,
Yep.
precincts. Do governments have to get involved to open up space to say, okay, we'll get more businesses in?
Yeah, there's a few things that we have to do. The first is, one is just basic planning. Like, you've got to reserve industrial land. You've got to reserve big chunks of it. And it's always a competition, and I'm sure that the Mayor would agree with me about this. There's always a big competition to rezone that for residential. It's obviously a higher value use, but it's not in the long term the highest value for the community. So I think getting real planning around industrial land, and then getting help from state governments to service that land, because a company's not going to come in if that land's not serviced. Then getting the connectivity that people have talked about. But the big thing that big companies say to me is, I need to know I'll be able to get the skilled people that will allow me to scale up. So we've got to actually do two things. We've got to bring skills in from other countries, and we've got to skill up our existing people. And we've got to concentrate, I think, our effort in fewer places rather than trying to do everything. But if you get those things right, connectivity, training, reserving industrial land, planning, I'm always calling for these 30-year infrastructure compacts, which you would have between state, federal and local government in places like Bendigo, where you do sort of like a 30-year compact that says this infrastructure will happen here. And then local government can reserve the industrial land. Then you've got a plan to service the land. Now, if you're a company, a big international company, and you can see that, and then you can see the universities working, you can see the skills coming up, you think, and then you've got an airport, then you think, actually, I am going to locate that manufacturing facility in Bendigo because I can get stuff out through the airport. And we've got to stop thinking about places like Bendigo, I can think of hundreds across Australia, as that's a kind of satellite of Melbourne. No, this is about connectivity in central Victoria, and this is about connectivity of central Victoria with the world, not everything kind of back to the mothership in Melbourne. So I think there's a pile of things, but the fundamental thing it takes, Kieran, is vision and planning. And we just got to get on with things.
When you talk about that, though, so this is a wonderful part of Australia. Many agricultural producers. The airport, as Rob said, you've got one bounce into the world. Why not just go directly into Asia?
Yeah, exactly. You could, but you need some kind of logistics hub there. So when I was out there this morning, I was thinking of what I'm doing in Western Sydney, this thing I'm chairing. So we'll have a big value-added infrastructure piece that's a kind of integrated logistics hubs that will basically finalise a product and send it straight to Asia. That's what you can do. Because then you're talking about getting something from paddock to an Asian middle class within, say, 24 hours or 36 hours at the most. But that's fantastic. Mm. And then you think we're going to have 3.5 billion people in the Asian middle class, big spenders. You start to think about the market possibilities there. And they're willing to pay for premium products. And then if you think about manufacturing, this highly specialised stuff, people are willing to pay big dollars for that, and they're willing to pay for that specialisation, they're willing to pay for that prototyping. And it's just really about getting that at scale. So I'd love to see the new government create 20 or 30 precincts around the country and really invest in them and concentrate on them, which if you go to South Korea, you go to Germany, you go to England, they don't try and do this in 100 places, they try and do it in about 20, and they really double down on it.
Christian Bennett, what do you think about that idea, sort of final stage processing around the Bendigo airport and then into the region?
Well, I think you've seen this actually work very successfully in such as in Toowoomba. And to Jennifer's point, she was talking about the need for skills, and it's not just for ourselves, but also for example, the supply base that we'd love to see develop around, food production in an area like this. We have a number of suppliers, smaller suppliers in the Greater Bendigo area, who we can work with and tailor, could be anything from 5 stores to 50 stores to, getting up to 1,000 stores is very different, but that's still a very big business that you can grow at 50 stores. And, we've got wonderful examples nearby, whether it's Keen free-range eggs up north in Huntley, or Josh's rainbow eggs, organic eggs down in the Kerry Valley, Castlemaine Kitchen. Lots of little suppliers who, they too need the skills to be able to grow and invest and take advantage of the opportunities that exist. But those opportunities then to expand into Asian markets, I think it's an extremely exciting idea, and that's the kind of boldness and the vision that's necessary to have. And, fortune favours the brave.
Rob, what's your thinking on this in terms of the skills side of it? Because obviously we talk about the labour shortages. There's a skill shortage too. I'm sure it's potent here as it is right around the country.
Yeah, so our surveys, well, even looking back at Regional Australia Institute figures from late last year, I think our unemployment rate in Bendigo was lower than almost everywhere else. And we're seeing it consistently in our surveys that there's a lack of professional and technical skills available to the local market. And I think we all know it. When we see a job ad, it almost invariably gets filled by somebody resigning from another Bendigo business and going and working in that new location, and then we have another vacancy. So in the short term, we have to find a way to encourage some of those people who've had a tree change and are now sitting in their bedrooms in Bendigo still working in their Melbourne jobs. We need them to relocate the other part of their life to Bendigo. But longer term, I think we need to do more work with the education providers to look at how we can think about the sorts of programs that will be needed to supply professional skills over the next 10 or 15 years. I think that's a big part of some of the work that's happening now in Bendigo to do that. But in the short term, we're going to have to find a way to bring more people into Bendigo to fill those skills. And then we run into issues around where are they going to live. I think you've probably all had issues with trying to attract people to town and there's nowhere for them to live. So I think we've got a few issues around that. And again, part of that's going to be the planning. We've got the Commonwealth Games coming up in 2026. Now that provides a fantastic opportunity for us to think about, what's the long-term value of that? We're going to need athletes' villages in Bendigo, beds for those athletes. But what happens after they go? Do we want to create all this accommodation that can be trucked out again after the Com Games have happened, or do we want to focus on the sorts of accommodation we can build so that we've got a residual benefit, so that we've got housing for essential workers, or we've got lots more trendy places in the CBD that are part of reinvigorating the CBD as well. We'll call it the downtown rather than the CBD because it becomes much more residential and focused, and it's got apartments. And I think Bendigo's in that really interesting point between transitioning between a large country town and a small regional city. And I think that there's some big changes that we ought to be thinking more about the next 15 or 20 years.
Well, it's an incredible CBD. Just driving, in today, it's absolutely stunning. And is that something you've noticed, that a lot of people have moved out of Melbourne to get out of? Well, during COVID, it was obviously a pretty tough time everywhere, but to come to the regions, more space, get out of the rat race.
It's not only I've seen, the stats will actually show you that, the net migration into regional Australia, and especially those towns and cities that are, within a couple of hours of the capital cities, you'll see real growth that's continuing now. And, and when we look at things like house prices, and they're starting to sort of abate now, the rises that we saw in the metropolitan areas, we're actually still seeing an increase in house prices in regional Australia. So, we are, I think, Rob, you're right, we're sort of right on that cusp, and there's, and we know ourselves within this town will have people that don't want us to get any bigger and others, and when you're running businesses, you do, you recognise that you actually do need to get bigger to continue to sort of to stimulate the economy, etc. But we are a regional city, but we're still a town where you'll drive around the block to try and get a park right outside of the door that you're trying to, you go to. So we haven't quite made, some of those sort of mental shifts yet, but they're coming, and and I think we have all of the ingredients here. And Jennifer sort of ran through that. Like I said, it's great to get people from outside of Bendigo coming in and giving their independent perspective, I suppose, of what they see. But we have all of those ingredients. That means that we've got all the foundations to be able to, be a big part of not only helping the recovery from a COVID perspective for Australia, but setting up this city and this region for the very futures of our kids and generations to come.
It seems to me, just, having read through everything and talking to you guys this morning and now, it's just a couple of things that need to be done to unlock it. whether it be sort of the approval process on industrial estates or housing or infrastructure via improved train travel. Is that a fair way to characterise it?
Yeah, and it's the most frustrating part of it. We've had a few discussions earlier and even this morning when we're out and about, and I think it's a conversation we have all the time. If we've got all these ingredients, if we've got this energy and this passion and the people and the skills and so forth that we have in this region, why aren't we? What is sort of holding us back? We've talked a lot about, from a political perspective, that perhaps we haven't had the money put into Bendigo that others may have, because they're in a much different situation, probably needed investment into their regions. But I think that's actually made us stronger as a community, because we band together, whether it's private business and public, we all band together, for the good of this region and wanting to actually move us forward. But I think there are just some things, and it does go back to, and I've got the Mayor here and the CEO of the greater city of Bendigo, it is some of that red tape. It is some of that stuff. It takes way too long for approvals to go through. We talk about with housing, and Rob, you're right with housing, we're attracting people and then saying, well, you're just going to have to live in a caravan for a little while until we can sort of find housing. We've got more people coming into the region than we are in actually new approvals for construction of homes. And that's been a decade-long, probably even longer issue for us, and it's just catching up with us now. So, there are things that we need. We can't wait 6 years for the, land to be developed to actually, put more housing onto. So there's some things that we know, and if we look back through COVID, we're able to do things really quickly. When we work together, all levels of government, business, the Business Council did a wonderful job, regulators, banks and so forth. You saw everyone working together, and you were able to move really quickly and do things, that we thought would take years to be able to do. But what's happened now? We all revert back to, well, we're sort of coming out through the end of COVID, so we'll just go back to the old practices. We can't. We've actually got to move a lot faster.
What are your thoughts on that, Jennifer? Because you've seen through your various stages of your career these issues. How does Bendigo overcome some of those obstacles?
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to have that cooperation between business and the three levels of government. But if I sort of think, what would I do if I was in charge? What could possibly go wrong? I'd build an advanced manufacturing facility here, because I think part of the challenge is how you scale stuff up. And I do about 10 of those around Australia, and obviously I'm doing one in Western Sydney. But that allows you to prototype stuff, it allows you to work with the university, it allows small business to be able to kind of have someone else take the risk, it allows people to match people up with bigger providers. So I do that. I would then do a different sort of education model. So where you've got TAFE and university, short courses, micro-credentials, blended together, where employers say, I need this, and this, and those courses get developed. And that in and of itself will attract the private sector who says, well, I'm going to go to Bendigo because I can get land, I'm near an airport, there's a lot of skilled people there, there's a manufacturing base there, and I can also get my people skilled up really, really quickly. I'd start to reserve big chunks of land for industrial, I'd start to bring forward housing development. It is a case that, if you start doing all these things collectively, people will come, because you get that affordability edge that suddenly a house in Bendigo is $200,000 cheaper than a house in Melbourne. People start saying, actually, that's a pretty good deal for me. Then, of course, your connectivity around the airport. I mean, these things, they're not rocket science. I mean, they're just kind of practical things to do. But you've just got to get on and start doing a couple of them. So I'd certainly do, it's interesting, the education thing I'm doing in Western Sydney, which is that model. It's a blended kind of like you do micro-credentials at TAFE or at universities. The companies say, we want one of these, one of these. A lot of companies ring me now and say, that's the reason I'm going to go there, because I want one of those. So you've got to just make a start with a plan. I think we spend, if I were to count the cost of the number of plans that have been written in Australia about all these issues, we could have colonised Mars 5 times, and we just got to kind of say, well, what's the kind of first step, and then get on with it. And it is that cooperation, but it is about little steps lead to big change, actually.
It's like to create the hub.
Yeah, and then of course you've got to do the marketing and promotion, and you've got to promote the things that Marty's talking about. Because if you want young entrepreneurs to come and relocate out of Melbourne, they are not going to come if there's no restaurants, no recreation facilities, no cycle tracks, no art galleries, no cultural. They're not going to do it. They'll stay where they are. So, you know, you've got to get that combination of things working, and then you've got to promote it. Then you've got to. But a lot of stuff happens with people promoting it. Then people come and their experience isn't great, and that's bad, because then they say, well, I went there and it wasn't very good. I couldn't get a job. The kids couldn't get a job. So, you know, but it's you've got to do this over the long term. I just see us, you know, I've been looking at this for years. We stop and start so many things in Australia. Everyone gets a bit of energy around something and everyone loses energy, and then we don't keep going. We've got to just stay the course.
Well, it sounds to me like all those ingredients are already here in terms of those pieces that Jennifer pointed to in terms of putting it together. And I guess if you look at it, that sort of hub situation is happening already via the hospital and La Trobe and those linkages. Is that fair to say in terms of the getting the skills and the right training in them?
I think it's a bit of a push-pull, and if you invest for the long term, you actually start to get it right. I think you know, I've had a look at a few cities in North America where you know, a good city where people wanted to be, the university trains the right people, and they actually don't want to leave that city. They don't want to go everywhere else to find jobs. They want to stay there. And what happens is that the employers, the manufacturers, realise that if they want to employ the best people, they need to relocate some of their operations to those cities. And you have this kind of virtuous circle then. If you get the momentum going the right way, you have students working in businesses, bringing in new ideas from wherever they've come from. They're then experienced when they finish uni. They want to stay in the city, the businesses cluster around that city, and it becomes better and better as you go. I think that's what we need to work on. I think the relationship between the hospital and, or primarily La Trobe, but Monash has also got a medical school here as well. These are really important opportunities, because you get not only highly skilled professionals who want to work in the hospital, but some of the better ones, some of the smarter ones also want to have a research element to their job. So they're attracted to be part-time at one of the universities, part-time at the hospital. And so you build up this, the really smart sort of capital stake in your city, and that helps to attract more people. And I think that can happen across a whole lot of industries if we get that right. Not everything, as Jennifer says, but let's focus on what we're really good at. I love University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. They had a city that was built on heavy engineering back in the early days of the 1800s. And so they've found their niche in advanced manufacturing and IT, all those sorts of things. They spin off entrepreneurs from the university all the time. When I was over there, one of their new graduates had just sold their business, and they had $25 million, and they were donating, I think, $5 million to the university and coming back to study and do some more stuff. And yeah, we're not the culture of North America for that, but I think that's the sort of thing. You know, Waterloo's a town or a city that's a fair way from Toronto. You'd think it was out in the middle of nowhere. But it's a city that connects itself to the world. It doesn't say, oh, we're a satellite of Toronto, or you have to go through Vancouver to get to us. Waterloo is connected to everywhere, and I think that's when we look around, Australia's development on the major capital cities is really weird compared to the rest of the world. Like nobody else does it like that, and I think the opportunities for regional cities that are connected, other cities that have done really well across time and space. You know, there are cities almost in the middle of nowhere that are still thriving 800 years later after they were started, because they're connected and they're important, and what they do locally is really valuable. We're starting a bit of a distance behind, but there's that opportunity in Bendigo, I think, now, and maybe we come together for national emergencies, but maybe we should come together for national opportunities and take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, and Marnie, it's something sort of fits with something you said to me earlier about the regions driving the post-COVID recovery. And this city fits right in the middle of that, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's any secret, and Jennifer, you and I have had many discussion about this and sort of been advocating about this, is that regional Australia can really power, the recovery from COVID. Now, it's interesting that we're now sort of looking into new challenges, I suppose, coming out of COVID, and we thought we're probably going to get a softer landing coming out of COVID. It looks like it might be a little bumpy now. But, the industries that are actually based, and I'm not just talking about the agricultural industry and the food industry and so forth, but the industries that are based in regional Australia, if you can actually power regional Australia, it will absolutely power the economy, the Australian economy. And that's collectively, not only this region, but regions right across Australia can actually play that role.
We'll get some questions from the audience, so please put some thoughts together if you'd like to ask any of our panel a question this afternoon, and I'll go to you next, but just to Christian Bennett first of all, before I do. On that point that Rob made earlier about those that have made the tree change and then sort of settle in and they're still working for a place in Melbourne or Sydney, but they're living in Bendigo, but trying to relocate them physically here. I guess you don't have that issue with your business once you get them here. They're part of it and part of the community, as you said, since before World War II.
Yeah, very much. They're locals that we employ here, and there are some great jobs. I mean, retail is a major employer in this part of the world. We have our store managers here. They're running operations that are larger than some ASX companies. They've got teams of 150, 120 people per store. They might have an annual revenue line of between 25 and 40 million. These are big businesses. Retail, is. Yeah, we'd love retail to be actually a more aspirational career here, and they're a very important part of the fabric of our company. If you think 45,000 people of our 170,000 people live and work in regional Australia, so the opportunities for regional Australia are very important to us. Rob mentioned earlier the Regional Australia Institute, for example, who has developed a number of ideas as to how to power, as the way Marnie has spoken, growth in Australia's regions. You have Jennifer articulate a number of ideas. I do think this issue of, and I think Jennifer used these words, and what I was thinking is, build it and they will come. We don't want to act recklessly, but we do need to act with a level of boldness and ambition, and take well thought ideas and move them forward. And that will be, that will create some of the dynamics we're talking about here as to how regional Australia can play an even larger role in the long-term prosperity of Australia.
Anyone with a question? Anyone yet? Or comment, please? Yep.
I told everyone earlier that Bendigo weren't short on words. So
I'll head over with the microphone.
You can't prove me wrong. You've got to have lots of questions and comment.
Yeah, comments are fine as well.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Jennifer and Marnie and Christian and Rob for being on the panel. And this has been a long time coming, as we know. And part of the initial discovery of having a session like this was about launching Greater Bendigo, Stronger Greater Bendigo 2030, which is the economic development plan of the city. All the ingredients that you speak about, Jennifer, in terms of advanced manufacturing, education, connectivity, whether it's digital or transport, health. It's very much the platform of our plan, and that's starting to drive in some strong directions. We spoke about it just briefly earlier. Advanced manufacturing obviously is a critical piece, and it's about how do we grow our own manufacturing. Everyone wants to bring the bright, new, shiny business to town. That takes a lot of time, energy and money. How do we actually grow our manufacturers to get to that stage where they're the ones expanding into our industrial estates? And where have you seen that done really well? What's their magic that we might be able to tap into?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Ken and Steve and I were talking about this morning. So where I've seen it done really, really well is Sheffield in the United Kingdom. So if everyone remembers Sheffield, old coal mining town, what's that movie? Full Monty, I think is filmed in Sheffield. And obviously the coal mines shut down, but what they had was a similar sort of specialised machining capability that Ken and Steve have got. And what they did was the UK government then created this advanced manufacturing